questions are never ending with regards, how these drugs got into Nigeria, what's going on with the NDLEA and prosecution. But some other question, and another perspective, would be the danger, that this poses to society and, of course, people in, communities around here. This morning, we're speaking next with Dr. Dayo Osholowu from the doctors, was the Nigerian doctor here in the country. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. 194 billion naira worth of drugs in one region. And of course, now we're talking about 8.8 billion in another region. Let's talk about, drug prevalence here in Nigeria. How bad is it?
I think the statistics show that across Nigeria, first, we have a high population of youth. Over 70% of our population is over the age of 30, under the age of 30. And we know that of this group, we have in some areas of Nigeria 14%, in some areas of Nigeria 16% of people who are drug users. So we know that this is a high statistic. And also, we're also seeing the effects of this use across, our country, in culture, and also in the health services.
This is obviously a problem, but let's talk about how we even got here in the first place. There have been, an evolution. Let's talk about the evolution of drug abuse in Nigeria. How did we get to where we are? And how does drug abuse become, how do people get attached to drugs? I think that would be the question.
I think in the 70s, the issue of drugs in Nigeria was mainly an issue of being a transit point, as you alluded earlier in your interview with Mr. Femi. And so Nigeria has been a major sort of player in international drug circuit. There's been, in the past, historically, a route through Nigeria, through our ports, through our airports, to sort of transit and deliver drugs to other parts of the world where there is demand. But what we're seeing today is there's a shift. There's a shift from Nigeria being a hub for the transit to a hub for use. For instance, with the issue of crystal meth. Crystal meth is a very sophisticated substance, and we had previously seen Nigeria being a production hub, so producing crystal meth for exports. But now we did some research on the Doctors Nigeria, and we found that now there is increased use of crystal meth in Nigeria. And so I think, for instance, with the issue of tramadol, we had a big bust in VGC. Most of that was for local consumption and not for export. So we're seeing a big shift from being a transit point for drugs to being a big user for drugs. And it's making a big impact on our economy and also on the youth and also on the health system as well.
I think another angle to look at it or to explore would be the way out. We've seen that drug use have become, it's become a recreational tool. We see that in parties, and even here in Lagos, Nigeria, you're walking on the way and they're advertising certain types of drugs, certain types of recreational drugs, they call it. What is the way out? Do we have rehab facilities for those who are already addicted? How much access do we have to these rehab facilities? And for those who really want a way out, what are the first steps?
Well, we honestly have to say our health system is in bad shape. 90% of the beds in our country are occupied. And so we understand now that there's an increased incidence of drug use. For instance, with crystal meth addiction, it's super addictive, and the chances of getting off it after just using it one time are very slim. So you have from use to chasing, and then the only way to get them out is rehab. So our rehabilitation centers are already full. There needs to be a big, big investment in expanding beds across Africa. In Nigeria, we have 5 beds per 1,000. Across Africa and globally, we're talking about 20 beds per 1,000 people. And so there needs to be a big investment in infrastructure. But even if we had what is required, which is about $20 to $30 billion today, it's going to take time to build those beds. So I think what's most important is the campaign. So the campaign has been focused on Nigeria as a transit hub, on the trade of drugs, but I think there needs to be a bigger campaign now on use. The narrative is already in the cultural space. If we look at pop culture, if we look at Afrobeat, most of the lyrics are already laced with drug seeking and drug using behavior, and most of our youth already sort of accept that it's okay to go to a party and get high. We have terms like, trabaye, just entering into the discourse where people think it's normal, it's natural, to take a hit of crystal meth. But this is something that once they start, or sort of once they dip into it, they can't get out. So there needs to be a big campaign to show that, we had it in the 70s, and I think we need to have it again. We have to say no to drugs, not even to using, not even to seeing, not even to accepting. We need to have a big campaign as the first step to stop, and also, secondly, a big investment in infrastructure.
I want to ask about, in the time that you've spent, having these conversations and doing the research that you've done, what for you is the most shocking thing that you've found?
So on the first season of The Doctors Nigeria, we had one episode, and it's airing on News Central, sex, drugs, and Zanku. And I think we had a few users who had gone into rehab and were now clean, come on the show and tell us their story. And I think the most shocking thing I heard in one of those interviews was how accessible it is to get drugs. Like, you can literally go on TikTok, you can go on Instagram, you can go on Twitter, follow somebody, send them a message, and a dispatch bike would be at your home in an hour. And it's not only in Lagos, in cities across the country. So how easy it is to get drugs, and also how cheap it is. Now we also have these bunks, we call them drug houses. Basically, they are maybe flats, homes that have been rented for a period, and the drug dealer essentially is selling the drugs in pinches. So while before, to get, let's say, a kilogram of crystal meth, you need to spend about 30 to 50,000, but you could actually get a pinch of crystal meth for 2,000 naira. So now we're having drugs not only being accessible, but also being easy to buy, not so expensive. And crystal meth is sort of a high quality drug. It would deliver a hit in 2 minutes, and you stay high for 2 hours. So previously you needed to sort of other drugs were more accessible, but they weren't of this quality. So you're having sort of a triple threat. You're having high quality drugs, they're cheap and they're accessible. So I think this is the most shocking thing that I discovered as a physician.
Not just accessible, but they're also being glorified. We have a long way to go. We hope that the work starts. Dr. Dayo Osholowu, thank you for your time with us this morning on Breakfast Central.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.